There's a well-known formula in finance called the rule of 72, which estimates how long it takes for an investment to double in value. For my guest, Steven James Ferris, the rule of 72 means something entirely different. 72 hours to bike across Iceland for charity. What can happen in just 72 hours? For Steven, it was a life-changing journey filled with challenges, triumphs, and a new sense of purpose. Get ready to cross rivers, navigate streams, and even take a fall or two as we dive into Steven's incredible adventure. Welcome to Journey with Jake. This is a podcast about adventure and how through our adventures we can overcome the challenges of life that come our way. While I expect you will learn some things about different adventures, this show will entertain you. Each episode will feature a different guest or guests as they share experiences and stories from the different adventures they have been on. Not only will you be entertained, but you will also hear the failures and trials each guest faces and what they have done or are doing to overcome the hardships that come their way. My goal is to take each of us on a journey through the experiences of my guests with the hope that you'll be entertained and inspired to overcome your day-to-day challenges. After all, it's not all about the destination as it is about the journey. I'm your host, Jake Bushman, and I'm thrilled to bring you another fantastic episode. Today, I had the honor of speaking with Steven James Ferris. Steven is a former member of the Royal Air Force, where he worked in parachute testing. He's also a corporate professional, a devoted family man with 3 children, and an adventurer at heart. We had an incredible conversation about his 72-hour bikepacking journey across Iceland for charity. Before we dive into that conversation, remember to subscribe to Journey with Jake wherever you listen to your podcast. If you enjoy the show, I'd love it if you could leave me a rating and review. That really means a lot. The best way to stay connected with me is by following Journey with Jake on Instagram at Journey with Jake Podcast. I share clips from upcoming, current, and past episodes, along with personal stories about my own journey. I'd love to hear from you, so drop a comment and let me know your favorite episode. You can also catch Journey with Jake on YouTube. Just search Journey with Jake Podcast, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. Lastly, I'm proud to say Journey with Jake is part of the Podmatch Podcast Network. Check out podmatch.com/network for other great shows. Now, it's time for another great adventure. Steven James Ferris pushed himself to the limit during his 72-hour bike ride across Iceland. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to check out episode 51 with Anna and Edo, where we explore human-powered travel and adventure. All right, let's jump into my conversation with Steven James Ferris. It's an honor for me. I've got Steven James Ferris with me today. Steven, welcome to Journey with Jake.
Jake, thank you. I'm psyched to be here. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. I love people like you who are just out there being adventurous, doing things that are tough, but then I see a smile on your face, and I love that. We're going to dive into this whole 72-hour adventure you did in Iceland. We're going to talk about that. Before we do that, though, I want to know a little bit about who you are, where you're from, your background. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about Steven James Ferris.
Thanks, Jake. Yeah, so I'm Steve. I'm Steven if I'm naughty, but you can find me all over the internet if you Google Steven James Ferris. I'm a proud father of 3 children. They are young, 4.5, 3, and 1-year-old, so I've got my hands full. I'm a former military officer, so I served in the Royal Air Force in the UK for 12 years as a regular active duty and then serviced. And prior to that, I trained as a teacher. So I've got kind of a broad background, and then more recently, I went into like a corporate role, which has been amazing, allowed me to start a family, to choose where I live. You know, a lot of people in the sort of civilian world take that for granted, but that's something that's really important to me to see my kids growing up. Let's face it, during COVID, there wasn't much better to do than start having kids. So we definitely did that. I'm kind of busy with the family, but also, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you was something that's really ignited my passion for adventure. It was the challenge that you mentioned in Iceland. I know we'll get onto that, but that's kind of what makes me tick, I guess, is being outdoors. I love being on my bike. I love running. any kind of hiking, outdoor activities. I've just been drawn to the outdoors. And I think also when I left the military, I don't know, had that almost separation anxiety of losing my tribe, and felt drawn to the outdoors, and always kind of found solace there when I wasn't really sure which way to turn. Yeah, I kind of try to harness my adventurous side and just get out in the great outdoors.
I love it. I think people who've been in the military before, I've talked to a handful of folks who've been in the military. And yeah, I think for whatever reason, they seem to have this adventurous streak about them. I don't know if that's what it is. It's missing out on being with their group or whatever, but they seem to be drawn to that. You kind of feel like that's what you've been, or was it something that you grew up doing? Were you an outdoorsy kid growing up?
I don't know. I always loved being on my bike. When I was a kid, one of my neighbors was, he was a cyclist for like Team GB, and he would have the best bike, and I'd just be trying to keep up with him on my BMX. He'd be dragging me around the local hills and whatnot, and I'd just be drawn to that and really enjoying being outdoors. And it was always kind of, that for me felt like freedom, being on two wheels. So that was, and also I spent summers growing up on my grandparents' farm in South Wales. Had a big sheep farm, big sort of beautiful rolling hills around that area. And yeah, I just kind of maybe got a bit of a passion for the outdoors from that too.
What drew you to the military? Why did you say, I'm going to go into the military?
I mean, I mentioned I trained as a teacher before, and I never thought that I could join the military. I had asthma as a child. So I was always thought, well, Air Force, they're not going to take me because I had asthma. And then it was just through a chance meeting with a Air Force careers person at my university. So, well, as long as you're, clear for 3 years, I think it was, or maybe 5. I think it was 5 years. You had to be clear of your asthma medication. Then they would take you. And I thought, well, I'm 3 years clear. I could maybe I'm just going to chance it and see what happens. And I kind of went through, and it didn't get picked up, and I managed to get in. But I think the reason for wanting to join the Air Force probably stems from my great uncle, who was an air engineer on board Lancaster bombers in World War II. Sadly, didn't make it, but he was always a bit of a family folklore that followed around him, and there was always that kind of allure of the Royal Air Force just always kind of spoke to me as something that I would be interested in doing. And then as I grew up, I found that I was scared of heights. So I thought, well, still got this challenge, something that when I realized that the asthma thing possibly wasn't going to be a problem, I thought, well, that's a great way to try and get over that issue, over that phobia. And there was a role that I noticed called parachute jump instructor. I thought that's going to be a great way of pushing yourself outside your comfort zone and like seeing whether you can really get over that fear. So yeah, that's where I went.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Someone who has a fear of heights, and then you're jumping out of planes. You're a parachute guy. Tell me a little bit about that experience, because I think you said you even were like a test parachutist or something. That sounds dangerous, just when you say it like that.
Yeah. I mean, there is absolutely an element of danger, but I mean, it's very methodical. And the motto of the UK parachute school is knowledge dispels fear. So they teach it in such a way that, some of the guys that get through as parachute jump instructors, I should say, we are responsible for training the parachute regiment, so the regular Green Army, all the way up to UK Special Forces. So you probably heard of the SAS and so on. So everything is designed to allay the fears, or to make it as simple as possible. All the training is just laid out like the first thing you do is a pull lesson. So they have the parachutes hooked onto the inside of the aircraft. This is like the low level sort of round parachutes. If you've seen Band of Brothers, that kind of really low level stuff. They'll get it. They'll get all the troops to one side, and they'll pull that parachute out so that you can see, look, this is how the whole line deploys. This is the breaking strain of each of these threads. This is why this is quadruple stitched. This is the breaking strain of the entire harness. So people are going, well, I'd have to be like twice the weight of an elephant for this to possibly break. So now I have confidence in this equipment. So therefore the next step is being competent and training and going, through your onboard drills, exit drills, etc. yeah, it is dangerous, but everything is kind of mitigated to an extent. And yeah, sort of the last 3.5 years of my career, I was really privileged to spend with the UK parachute test team. So we were developing, basically writing the rule book, developing UK defence capability. So that was kind of the zenith of my career. It was always the thing I really wanted to do. And then everything thereafter just was like, you know what, I'm probably going to be promoted and I don't really fancy doing a desk job. If I'm going to do a desk job, I might as well do it in the civilian world and, choose where I live and start a family. So yeah, that's where I went.
And that's where you went. All right. So I think of, this role of the military, and I think it's very, especially with parachute and that sort of thing, it's very meticulous. You were kind of saying you start very basic and, you mitigate it by having all these processes and procedures and things like that. And then I sometimes think about adventurers and people who are adventurous, and sometimes they seem kind of spontaneous and just do things by the seat of their pants a little bit. Maybe that's not the case, but it just kind of seems like that. So how does the two compare for you? Because I know you got this adventurous streak in you too. How does that, being used to being meticulous and very, by the book and getting things done, how does that relate to your adventurous side?
I think so if I go back to what you're saying about being meticulous, having that plan in sight, one of the things I took away from my parachuting career was visualization and just being able to close your mind off to everything, practice your drills in your head, and you go through each thing that could possibly go wrong and practice for that eventuality in your mind, which might sound crazy. And the first time I saw it, I saw, guys kind of opposite me in the aircraft, and they're literally doing funny things with their hands, and they were holding, what are these guys doing? One of the older, more experienced guys, actually one of my best friends these days, he said, no, you really need to pay attention to this. And this is something that we all use. And it's something that allows me to, I guess, be able to sort of visualize a concept that I'm not in that situation. I'm not, going to Iceland, or I'm not going on this adventure yet, but I can see it. I can almost feel it, and have that kind of vision to be able to plan it. The spontaneous bit, yeah, I mean, it's a bit like, I guess, standing on the ramp of a C-17 at 25,000 feet. You got to take that step. You got to jump. So the only way to do it is to do it, and having that kind of the ability to back yourself. That's my mantra in life. Is kind of rule number one is back yourself, because if you don't, no one else will. If you're trying to sell yourself in any situation, ask someone out on a date, you've got to back yourself. You've got to go into that. Yeah, there's going to be fear. Yeah, there's going to be trepidation. But if you've kind of prepared for that moment, then there's nothing stopping you. That's certainly my philosophy.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Now that you're kind of in the civilian world, what's that like? What's it like being, because it sounds like you deal with businesses and things like that. I think you're like a keynote speaker. I think you do all kinds of things like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been doing a corporate career where I'm looking after big deals, driving revenue, like 9-figure revenue streams for one of the biggest businesses in the UK. And it's taught me so much. And I've got to a point now where I can kind of, I feel like I can really leverage that experience to help others. So I do executive coaching, whereby I help leaders to kind of manage and lead with more authenticity, with courage. I think one of the hardest things in business, as in the military and as in all of our lives really, is to be vulnerable. But to be vulnerable is to be authentic. And that takes courage. So just trying to teach people that actually it's okay to be that way. And also the one thing that I took away from the Air Force, above all else really, is to lead with a duty of care to those in your charge. If you can treat them well, it's incredible what your people will do for you. So yeah, I kind of, those are my specialties. I'm breaking into the world of keynote speaking, predominantly with my Iceland adventure, actually, because that's something that just came out of nowhere, and it's really lit a spark for me. So yeah, it's pretty exciting.
And before we jump into that, because that was kind of a perfect lead into the Iceland adventure we're going to talk about. But before we do that, I want to ask about your role as a father. You have 3 young children. What's it like being a dad for you?
I absolutely love it. and I wouldn't change it for anything, but it is hard work. It's hard work in the best possible way. I just took my two sons. So I've got Theo is 4.5. I've got Zach who's 3. I've got Zoe's 13 months, and just she's snapping at their heels. Like literally, she just learned to walk. So it's incredible when they start to walk. You're like, whoa, you're how tall now? Like this, everything has got to be cleared off the surfaces. Everything's got to be kind of strapped down. So that's it's kind of funny but terrifying as well. And the lack of fear, for kids, they've kind of got to, you've got to have eyes in the back of your head to keep them at bay. I think that's the hardest thing as well, having 3. And I know you've got 4, Jake, so you probably advise me on this, but you're just outnumbered all the time.
All the time.
I made the mistake. Well, not the mistake. I had an adventure last weekend where I took my boys to London for the first time, and that was something else. I'm not going to take a pushchair. I'm not going to take one of these foldable things, because as soon as I fold it, then I've only got one hand now to try and grab 2 children on the tube, on the subway, right? Not doing that. So I've got like this kind of baby carrier that my 3-year-old's too big for on the front of me. I've got a backpack with all of our gear, and then I can put the 4-year-old on my shoulders, and trying to trek through London at times doing that was a bit of a challenge, but probably the safest way to travel with those 2. But yeah, probably a long answer to a short question. Absolutely love it. Every day is different, and you definitely learn new things about yourself. That's for sure.
I love it. Thank you for that. That's good times. Kids are fun, man. They are a blast, and you're right. You got to have your eyes in the back of your head, and they're quick. I got
patience and new communication styles you didn't even know existed. Like when they're having a meltdown, when the hormones are high, when they're just kind of they can't communicate, and it's just coming out as screams. You got to be the one to go, okay, just keep your head. Let's not get too emotional.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So I was looking on your LinkedIn page, and right at the top it says fundraising adventure. And I know this Iceland adventure that you did was about fundraising, but give me the background. How did this come about? How did you decide you're going to go bike across Iceland? And you're going to have to say the Icelandic names, because I know there's a national park there, and I don't want to butcher it. So I'll kind of let you just kind of give me the background on how this came about.
Thanks, Jake. So we, like I said, was working in a commercial team for a big UK company, and one of our team had a family issue, and one of the children needed treatment at Great Ormond Street Children's Hospital, which is like the flagship hospital in the UK for certainly for kids' cancer. And so we decided, okay, as a team, we're going to try and do as much as we possibly can to raise funds for Great Ormond Street. And so my boss, for example, ran the London Marathon, did a great job, raised lots of money. And then when we're doing like hospitality things, taking customers to events and things, we say, like, you know what, you enjoyed yourself, great, please donate, small amount, and it'll build naturally. And then we found we kind of reached a bit of a plateau. So I had a meeting amongst my peers, and everyone's like, well, what can we do? Can we do this? And can we do that? And I'm sitting there thinking, well, I'm not much good at baking cakes, but I can ride a bike. And I'd seen this ride on a website called bikepacking.com. And if any of your listeners are not familiar with it, it's an incredible resource. I'm not paid by bikepacking.com, or there's nothing in it apart from the fact that is an incredible online resource, a website with so much information. And I'd never been bikepacking before, but I know how to camp, kind of in so much as done it as a kid and a little bit in the military. And obviously I know how to ride a bike, but I don't really know how to rig a bike up with all this stuff. But maybe I can learn and seeing this, it was a 5-day ride across the Fjallabak National Park in Iceland, which is in the southern highlands. And I thought, this is incredible. The pictures were amazing. And so in this meeting, I thought, you know what? I don't know. I felt like I should maybe put my hand up, but then maybe I shouldn't. And maybe I should just do it, just for me and see what it's all about. But something at the time, because nobody else had many ideas, I said, well, I could do this. And I pitched it to the team. I came back a couple of days later and I pitched it. And they're like, wow, okay. Kind of everyone's maybe just giving it, okay, Steve, yeah, off you go. Go and do that. That sounds great. Yeah, brilliant. Just make sure you come back alive, because the ride on bikepacking.com was supposed to be a 5-day, 300-kilometer ride, a circular route, as a group. But I was trying to do it in 3 days on my own and unsupported. I was really trying to, like, for the first bikepacking trip, I was really trying to push the envelope to see where my limits were, because ultimately that's what I like to do. I like to see where those limits are and then kind of, yeah, see what the next thing is. But it was just such an incredible experience. And did it go to plan? No. Did I use every ounce of my military planning, organizational skills and experience? Yes. I contacted the author of the route. I was contacting Icelandic search and rescue. I was, equipped with a satellite communicator that would, send a beacon. I had the kind of distress button if I got, I tried to think of every possible thing, but then actually you can never think of everything on your own. So I was reaching out to people that I knew who were experienced in like military adventurous training more so than myself. So specialists in those fields, and saying, look, can you have a look at this risk assessment that I've written? I don't know if it's any good. I think I've got everything. You need to look at this, maybe a fatigue management plan. I'm not just that, So I'm kind of probably planning it way more than a lot of people would do an adventure, but I really, really enjoy the planning. I really enjoy the desktop exercise, because then actually that gives me the confidence, a bit like, the whole knowledge dispels fear and the parachuting thing. It's like, actually, it's the same thing. So when I'm getting off the plane in Reykjavik, when I'm, driving to the trailhead and I'm putting my bike together, I'm feeling pumped. I'm confident. Now, should I have been? Had I known what was ahead of me? Maybe not so much, but it was an incredible adventure, and I don't think I wouldn't, have changed anything. So, yeah.
All right, let's go back for a minute. You pitched the idea, and I think this happened in July, if I'm not mistaken. This is when it's happened in July. When did you pitch the idea? Like, how far from when you pitched it to when you left?
It was probably like April, something like that.
So just a few months.
Yeah, just a couple of months. Really, I wanted to. I think it was June actually. I did the ride in June.
Okay,
but it was just it was like a couple of months. So I didn't have a whole lot of time, but I thought it was enough time to get some funds, because ultimately I was doing this for charity. I think that was the biggest risk in it. It was not just, okay, telling everyone, hey, I'm going to try and do this, but also I'm not just thinking to myself now, I've got people relying on me, people sponsoring me to go and do this. I'm kind of committed to doing it to the best that I possibly can.
And how did you come up with the 72-hour thing? Like, where did you come up with that?
Well, I guess it was down to this 300 kilometers. And I thought, if I'm riding for like 10 hours a day, and it's, even hard terrain, even with all the gear I had, it was 40 kilos I had. So that's about 80, 90 pounds of kit, including the bike. I thought I can probably average 10 kilometers a day. So that's like 6 miles an hour, 10 kilometers an hour for 10 hours. So that's 6 miles an hour, 10 hours. So that'd be 60 miles, which is, 100 kilometers. And I thought, I can do that. Surely I can do that. That's absolutely doable. But I had never ridden in terrain like that ever in my life. I mean, it's just out of this world. And that's one of the things I've been kind of drawn back to Iceland. That was my third trip, not to that national park and first time riding a bike, but it's just very accessible from the UK. It's only a 3.5 hour flight, and it's like you're entering another world. It's absolutely incredible. It's very
one of my first episodes, I think it's episode 6 or 7, was a couple of friends who had just traveled to Iceland. It's just about their visit to Iceland, really, more than anything. And I've always just been impressed by Iceland. It does. It seems otherworldly to me when I see the pictures. And I know you shared a video, and I know you've got a video coming out of your adventure. In fact, it should be probably out by the time this comes out. It just seems incredible. I mean, the vistas and the landscape and everything about it just seems out of this world.
It is, and I encourage anyone to go and see it for themselves, because I think a lot of, even the pictures don't do it justice. The video, I've tried to bring it to life, but your eyes cannot process that kind of subarctic tundra and how far that expands. And there's so much detail of all the different colors and the ravines and the contours. It's just absolutely mind blowing. And I wasn't blessed with the weather when I did my ride. So there was 72 hours because I set off really late in the day on the first day. I actually rode for kind of 4 days and 3 nights, if that makes sense. So I started at 6 p.m., rode through, and then finished at just before 6 p.m. on the fourth day to make the 72 hours. But for 3 of those days, it was horizontal rain, just like cycling. I think at one point in the video, I say it's like riding through a cloud on the moon. If the moon was to have weather, it would be like it is in Iceland. It was crazy, but just, yeah, a great adventure. And I think the other thing that was kind of really gnarly, like I mentioned, was the terrain and trying to get through it on my bike. It would just unexpectedly throw me off my bike because the volcanic silt and ash. Sometimes it was firm, sometimes it wasn't, and you just never knew, and it would just go. And that was a constant.
Let me see if I understand that right. So you could be cruising along on what looks like dirt or whatever, but it's this volcanic material, and then it just gets soft. Is that kind of what it does?
Yeah.
Soft, where you sink into it and just.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, totally soft. It would invariably, well, it would be the front wheel, because I had my bikepacking bag on the front. If I was doing it again, I'd try and reconfigure the kit to make it more spread out, but I had quite a lot on the front. So I would then, unfortunately, the front wheel would dig in and I'd come off. But that first night was something else, because, like I said, I thought, do you know what? One of the big tailwinds I've got is 18 hours of daylight. Fantastic, 18 hours of daylight. That's great. So I flew in, got to Iceland about lunchtime, picked up some supplies, drove to the trailhead, put my bike together, locked the car up. Off I went. It's like 6 p.m. It's fine. Surely it doesn't really go dark. The sun kind of hovers around. But sure enough, by 11:30, midnight, it was dark. And I thought, I'm not going to be riding in the dark. So all I got was a head torch. So a bit of an error on my part. And just found myself kind of skating around. Like, I think it was like kind of trying to ski off piste in rollerblades. Is how you'd really, at any moment, it's going to go wrong. And I had to get to the first hut. So the way it works over there is you can wild camp if it's an emergency. Because it's a national park, they have these mountain huts, sort of a network of mountain huts. That you don't stay in the hut, and you can if you're going to book well in advance and pay. But there are campgrounds where you can pitch a tent and there's water. And one of the things I did in advance of the ride was reach out to the search and rescue, as I said, to share my ride, because I'm doing it on my own as best practice. But I also said to them, look, this is my kit list, like an abridged version. What is there I'm missing? Is there something I need to take? And they actually wrote back and said, you don't need a water filter. Come to Iceland. All our water's like triple distilled volcanic. You can drink it. I thought, great. Okay, it doesn't save me a lot of weight, but maybe sort of fist size.
Yeah, or
could be
in time, I guess, to filter something.
Yeah, it's something else.
Okay.
I take something else with me. I don't need the filter, so I left that. And then, as I found on that first night, I was down to my last like half-liter pint of water, and all of the water was either these kind of yellow sulfur-encrusted pools or glacial runoff that was full of silt, which I could have filtered, I could have used, but obviously didn't have my filter with me. So I just kept having to press on through the night. Managed to get to the first stop until like 2:30 a.m. At which point I'd fallen off the bike 3 times, knees bloodied, exhausted, but weirdly kind of cheerful. I think that was the thing, just being out in nature for some reason. Just there was some sketchy moments, but I don't know, I just had this energy, this cheerfulness that kind of carried me through, which is strange because I was, like I said, I was on my own.
Yeah.
Everything I kind of up until that moment thought about don't know if you're familiar with like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where you've got, you need shelter, you need food, and then you've got kind of, belonging to a
Basics.
tribe, and, love and all that. And the pinnacle of that is self-efficacy. So being, the best version of yourself and having a purpose. Well, I was living that. I was there. I was doing it. I feel great doing this, but without all that other stuff, it doesn't matter. Like, I was running out of water. Thankfully, never looked like I was running out of food, but lost at times, drenched through, cold, but just had this, just the kind of buzz to it. And I think part of that was certainly doing it for a great cause. Like I said, Great Ormond Street, incredible. My family have needed to use their services over the years, and they do incredible things for children right across the UK, not just in London. So that was massive for me, and I'm so glad that I did it, and it's spurred me on to think about doing more of the same.
I love it. A couple of things I want to talk about, especially with that first day. So you said you got there around noon, you got some supplies, whatever. And as you get to the trailhead, it sounds like you said you were pretty pumped. Like, you're like, this is it. I'm starting this adventure. Now, the stuff that happened in between that first stop was kind of like, you're falling off your bike 3 times, your knees are bloody, you're getting beat up, you're having issues, the weather's not great. You don't even get to the hut till 2 something in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
But you still, and at that point though, you kind of got a renewed sense of energy. And this is only day 1. You still have quite a few more hours to go. A couple of the areas. Anyway, that's just amazing to me that you had that whole experience, and the fact that you still were positive. Some people, someone like me, I don't know. I may at the end of that day 1 have been like, man, I'm in way over my head. Talked about that you said you had that motivation of the hospital in your mind. Did you think about those things as when you had those tough moments? Kind of how did you get through those tough moments?
Yeah, I think obviously on the one hand, that there are people in much harder circumstances than yourself with a lot less experience, people that are, children, super vulnerable, and I hate, my eldest has been admitted to hospital twice with like respiratory illnesses over the last few years, and it's been heartbreaking to watch. And thankfully he's been in and out within, a week each time. But for the families that are going through that, you kind of have that in your mind thinking, I'm doing this for a bigger purpose. But also, honestly, there is this, I can't let anyone down. It's almost like I don't want to say pride, but it's, I've got to do this. Like, whatever you're feeling, however you're hurting, whatever's bleeding, forget it. You've got to do this. But there was a really interesting moment when actually that kind of, I call it press-on-itis. When you just want to, I got to press on, it's like a bit of a disease, right? You don't want to have that take over and cloud your judgment. So, as I said to you earlier, like, this was my 3rd trip to Iceland. The one before, it was just a tourist trip with my wife, her parents, and we went over together. And my wife was 7 months pregnant with our first baby, and it was winter, and we were driving. We were trying to find the Arrowhead Mountain from Game of Thrones, that some of your listeners might be familiar with. And we'd left the hotel, and we thought, okay, we're going to take this road, and they were, yeah, that's fine, that's great. Nobody told me at the car rental, at the hotel, no one. It's not an excuse, but nobody told me that you have to check this particular Icelandic website where the highways authority tell you if the road's closed, especially in winter. You have to do it before every trip. I'd never heard of that. And like I said, it was my 2nd trip there. So I thought I would have known that. No. So we're driving along this road, and it's getting worse and worse and worse. And there's snow, and it's getting heavier and heavier. And I'm thinking, right, okay, well, it's going to be okay. I just got to keep going. And I could feel the tension in the car. Everyone's getting nervous. And I'm having to feather the throttle, kind of trying to use some of my off-road driving experience to keep the car going. Because I think if we stop, I haven't got a shovel, I haven't got any planks, I can't get us out. So I've got to keep the momentum going to try and find maybe some sort of small hill that I can turn the vehicle around and go back on. And it's just getting worse. And there is a drop. It's like a 40% incline down into, like, down the side of this volcano, covered in snow. And if we went down that, I wouldn't be speaking to you now. It was 100% guaranteed icy death, sea ice, you're gone, right? And we managed to get out of there because there was a local guy came the other way, he's like waving us down. The road's closed, what are you doing? Come on, I take you out. And thankfully, on the way back, we drive on the right in Iceland. On the way out, the right was right next to this drop. On the way back, I had the buffer of the lane that I'd just come up. It was awful. It was terrifying. It was far scarier than any of the parachute experiences I've had. I've had malfunctions and things go wrong in the air. This was worse. And when we got to a safe place, got into this gas station, just felt this like adrenaline dump. I kind of like shaking, just felt exhausted. And so I always remember that. Fast forward to day 2 of my ride, I'm speaking to one of the rangers saying, oh yeah, I'm going to take this mountain pass up to La Manalaga. She said, you going on that? Point to my bike. I said, well, yeah. I said, how good are you on that in snow? I said, sorry. She goes, yeah, that mountain pass has been closed for 2 weeks. Right. So again, sharing the route plan, assuming that people are really looking at it in the same detail I'm looking at it, possibly not asking the right questions or directing them in the right way beforehand, that's been missed. And all of a sudden, the entire plan to go and do this route is now in jeopardy. She said, well, you can go to the next hut and see if they've got some kind of update for you. But as far as I know, nothing's getting through there at the moment. So that was really hard to take, really hard. That was kind of probably the lowest part of the whole thing, just getting that news and thinking, no, there must be some way. And then realizing that actually you can kind of reframe what success is. I promised everyone I was going to come back. It's pointless me going out there and raising thousands of pounds for charity if I don't come back, because I don't get to do it again. Then I really have let people down. So that was always a commitment I had to everybody and myself to come back in one piece, to enjoy the experience. But I really had this crisis then of, well, have people sponsored me to go into the wild for 72 hours and, survive and thrive and do what I can? Or is it more about the 300 kilometers? I kind of had this, well, if I only get to do, half of that, is that embarrassing for me? Like, how am I going to front up to that? How do I present that back to people when they say, oh, could you do it? Could you not do it? And then just trying to recalibrate the route. There were things that went wrong that you could see in the video after that. But I think that was kind of one of the most important lessons for me, that you can actually pivot. And although I didn't do the intended route, the route that I took was actually arguably more difficult, because rather than take me through high country, it took me through low country. And then I had river crossings galore, like you wouldn't believe, which was really, really tough and hard going, but an experience I wouldn't have had the weather gods been smiling on me. But then I wouldn't have learned so many lessons that I took from that experience.
I want to talk about those river crossings, because that was something from the video that intrigued me a lot. Was first the amount of water, and it's beautiful there though, just these running waters, these little waterfalls. I mean, it's just, again, otherworldly to me. It just seems beautiful. But yeah, you're crossing these things. I think one time you went through misjudging it and got your foot wet, which you didn't plan on doing. I think you had some shoes that were made to go through the water, but then you were wearing the shoes that weren't, something like that. Talk about some of these river crossings, some of those experiences.
It doesn't sound like a lot getting your feet wet, but when it's kind of, like I say, that, the winds are whipping up at, kind of miles an hour, probably, 30, 40 miles an hour at times with rain, you kind of want to have warm feet if you can, but to stop at each moment and take the shoes off, take the socks off, and I just had like surf booties, stick the surf boots on, wade through. You're going to get cold feet, but then you can dry them off the other side. But it takes time to do that every single time. So I just kind of had this moment where I thought, do you know what? Can't be more than, 3 to 5 meters across this small river. I'll just go for it. And then before long, I was kind of up above the axles, feet like thrashing around. And just kind of only had myself to blame. There's no one else to shout at. I was just kind of mildly entertained by it to start with. And then realized, well, I've got the rest of my, I can either kind of change into dry socks, but what's the point when your shoes are completely soaking wet? So ended I had probably a good few hours that day of wearing the surf boots. And initially you got no, because there was only like a few, not even a quarter of an inch of insulation on the soles there. So you can feel every rock to start with, but then, sure enough, within half an hour, you can't feel anything because your feet are numb. So it was a really nice relief that evening to get the stove on and start to thaw myself out in the tent.
When you would get to the hut or wherever you were camping for the night, did you kind of replay the day? Were you just planning for the next day? Kind of what was your sense? Or were you just totally like, I'm just not even thinking about anything?
I think definitely the first night when it was like 2:30 a.m., I just wanted to eat some. I mean, I thought I needed to eat something and then go to sleep. So I ate through necessity and then just passed out. And then every other evening I did replay the day, and I made sure that I took time to write a journal, because it really helped me to make the film. And I think I took a lot of lessons from just transcribing it as well, because it was all like, rough shorthand in a notebook. And then my wife, when I got back, she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm staying up late on the laptop typing this stuff out. She's like, "What are you doing? What are you going to use this for?" I don't know yet, but I just need to get it down. I need to kind of just almost decompress these thoughts. So I was doing a lot of writing in the evenings, and then also when I knew that I couldn't take the one particular route, trying to plan a different route. And that was the thing when I mentioned earlier with the 300K, and what would it look like if I did a different route. At one point I was thinking maybe I just go back the way I came, get to the car, and just do a road ride for like, I don't know, however many kilometers I needed to do, 200K, 120 miles, whatever, to make it up to the 300 that I'd committed to. And then I realized, actually, that's not what it's about. It's not about that. It's about the adventure. It's about, I always say that adventure starts when the plan falls apart. And that's kind of, so many of us don't use that part of our brain where you have to think about navigating, or where am I going to get water from next, and all these kind of things that are quite primitive. They somehow make you feel alive when you're doing it, and that for me feels like the right thing to do, and to continue the adventure. So that's what I did. But certainly with going back to the river crossings, like you said, there was one part where I hadn't, because I was in like kind of uncharted terrain in terms of the research that I did was the full circuit, the 300K. This cut the corner quite dramatically, so that ended up doing about 180, which is still, not bad. But it took me through this glacial floodplain, which is about 2 football fields wide. And I kind of was presented with this. It wasn't all water. Thankfully, there were these shale banks interspersed between myself and where I needed to get to. But they actually presented a real challenge, because once you're in the water, you can't then see over the shale. So you're kind of almost looking at it as kind of a chessboard, thinking, right, okay, these are my next 3 moves. And then when I get up to the shale bank, then I'm going to be able to, and I'm on my own. I hadn't seen anyone that day. There's probably no one around for, tens of miles. And yeah, that was probably one of the sketchiest moments, being able, just because although in the video, it doesn't look like there's that much water. Actually, there is plenty of water. There's plenty. There's more than enough to sort of knock me off balance with, because I was hauling my bike on my shoulder, all my kit, like I said, it was about 40 kilograms, about 85 pounds. And I had a trekking pole. So I was walking through with the trekking pole, trying to feel my way, feel where the deep spots were in the water, obviously looking around. Before I went in, going back to kind of the visualization thing, I was practicing my actions on, in the event of an emergency. If I get submerged, if I go in, what am I going to do? Am I going to release the bike? Am I going to try and haul it up with me? What happens then? I'm soaking wet. I need to know exactly where my dry clothes are, where my stove is, where my tent is. I need to get that out. Just so many things that actually, if you just wait for that moment, you could quite easily get overwhelmed. And in an environment where hypothermia can set in very quickly, it was really important for me to do that mental preparation before, and then commit to it. Thankfully, I didn't go in, but yeah, definitely the sketchiest moment, and one that I was very, very pleased to see the other side of that river.
How or what was the deepest part? Like how deep did it get on when you're carrying your bike through?
I didn't have to carry it anything more than like waist deep. It was
Okay.
more like sort of mid thigh, and I tried to keep
Okay.
it because obviously as soon as you're submerging, then you're kind of riding in wet shorts, which is not fun and it's cold. So, but I mean, if I'd have gone through some of the car tracks, because they've got huge cars. I mean, Americans, you got big cars. Icelandic people, they've got big cars. I mean, these things mean business, huge like monster trucks. So if I'd have gone through some of the tracks, I'd have been well up to my chest, if not
So
completely.
deep. Yeah.
So I had to really pick my route, do a little recce up the riverbank, and make sure that I was comfortable as much as I could.
When you
With
were dealing with that, because I know, like you said too, you're having to be meticulous through that part of it, so you
yeah,
don't fall unless you don't submerge. Did you ever have any moments where you're like, oh, am I going to make this 72-hour time frame? Because it's you got to be careful doing that. Did you ever have any moments where you're like, I'm not sure I'm going to make the time?
yeah, I think the time again, it was almost the time was linked to the 300 kilometers. So once I realized that I wasn't going to be able to do the distance, the time was, yeah, okay, I need to try and keep to that in the spirit of things. And I obviously had a return flight to go and catch at some point. But I also knew that each of the first 3 days was mostly uphill. Even the river crossings, it was like, river crossing, then you're going up and down, and then river crossing, and then the final hut. I knew there was the final hut that I stayed in was actually the one that I intended to stay in had I done the full circuit on the final night. If that makes sense. Then that final day was mostly downhill, so I knew that was a real tailwind for me to try and make up as much ground as I could. And the final day was just a dream compared to the rest of it. The sun was shining. There was still, some rivers to tackle and some soft ground to navigate, but overall, it was just, yeah, I had a blast. It was great fun.
You were gifted something with that last day. Then downhill, sun shining,
Yeah,
boom.
it was. Yeah, it was the perfect way to end the trip. I know you've seen the video, so you'll know that I just inexplicably ended up joining the last sort of 30 miles or so of the Rift gravel race that day, which is a big off-road cycling event. And there were hundreds of other cyclists, none of them bike packing, I should add. They'll do the big circuit, just a sort of really lightly loaded kit, maybe a couple of water bottles and the bikes. Then there's me with a backpack, fully loaded frame bag, handlebar bag, saddle pack, riding. And they were like, what is this guy doing? So that was quite entertaining to do that. And then to finish, again, I didn't plan it. I parked my car there, 3+ days before. And lo and behold, they'd put up a inflatable finish line, with the MC music and everything, which was about, no more than sort of 100 yards from my car. So when they spotted me, they started, "Hey, this guy's coming!" Blah blah blah. And I thought, "Wow, I've got to ride through the finish line now." And as I did that, they handed me a beer, handed me a finisher's patch, and I thought, "Well, yeah, this is my lucky day."
And that was the finish too, which is so funny that was set up for you. I think one of my favorite parts of the film was that end part where you are riding with these other riders, and there's vehicles too, and some of these riders in this race are getting hesitant to cross the rivers, across the waters.
Yeah.
And you just like, you knew you're almost done. You're just like, I'm going. And you just went. And I just thought that
By
was
that
great.
point, by that point, I did not care about getting wet. I'd been wet for 3 days, and actually, it was quite nice because that day was like it was 25 degrees C, which I think is about 78 Fahrenheit. So it was quite a nice day, and I was, I'll go cool off. Don't know what you guys are waiting for. So yeah, it was good fun.
I love it. So now that you've done this, and I think it's awesome that you did that. You did it for a good cause. I think it did something for you. I mean, I can kind of see just with you talking about it. I love to see, my guests and just kind of the looks on their faces when they talk about their experiences. What do you think? Are you going to get out on some more adventures? What's kind of the plan for you moving forward?
Yeah, so I've got this kind of crazy idea that I think I've got a little bit of a hook in that 72 hours in dot 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 feels like an accessible adventure that most people can kind of aspire to do. And I know you have incredible adventurers on your podcast that do amazing things, and some of them take, months or years out of their lives to go and do it. But for me, I'm not in a part of my life where I can do that. I've, got family commitments, have a job. I can't do it. But I got so much out of doing what I did in just 72 hours that I want to tell everybody about the fact that 72 hours, you can have an incredible adventure. I think it's, if you went for 24, well, maybe you put an overnight in there, but it's not really, pushing it. 48 hours, okay, where are you really going to want to go to and get back in that time? If I'm looking overseas, 72 hours, I think, is a really perfect amount of time to go and, yeah, rejuvenate, find yourself, have that sense of purpose, that sense of belonging outdoors. Yeah, if your listeners are interested, then please follow my YouTube at Steven J Ferris. Follow my Instagram at Steven James Ferris. And actually, like I said at the top of the show, if you Google Steven James Ferris, you'll find my LinkedIn as well and my website, stevenjamesferris.com. I'm going to be putting more content out there. I'm going to be having more adventures throughout the year. And I'm going to be thinking about what possible charities there are out there that might be interested to partner with me. Also, very interested in doing more speaking engagements. So if people want to hear more of what I've got to say, if maybe they want to have a kind of private showing of the movie and the clip reels I've got from my parachuting days, and telling you all about the importance of avoiding pressonitis, being able to pivot, being able to remain cheerful in the face of adversity, then you know where to come.
I love it. Steven James Ferris, just search that on the internet and boom, find all your socials and all that information. I love the 72-hour thing. I think that's fantastic because people like me too, I've got a day job, I've got family commitments. It's hard to, bust away for months at a time and do things. So 72 hours, I think that's a good fit for a lot of people. I like that. I think that's a great plan. And yeah, I would encourage anybody to reach out to you for that. That sounds awesome.
I'm trying to figure it out around where can I fly from the UK, and I might even do one or two in the UK, but where can I fly from the UK, arrive and start riding the same day? So there's no like setup day. It's just off you go, get the bike out, go. And I will be doing it predominantly cycling because that's just what I know and what I love. And I've got that kind of bug now from doing the bike packing. But yeah, I think high Atlas Mountains in Morocco. I've kind of done ice. Now maybe do desert, do something fun there. And then even I was looking like Azerbaijan. There's a national park just north of Baku, which may be a stretch because I think it's about a 5-hour flight, but depending on timings, I'm just still in that kind of exploratory phase. But yeah, mark my words, there'll be more to come.
I love it. We kind of touched on this earlier. You kind of alluded to it, said a little bit about it, but it's a question I like to ask on this. What does adventure mean to you?
Yeah, I think you've got to have an element of pushing outside your comfort zone. So when I think back to my military days, we had a model. You imagine the sort of concentric circles. In the middle is comfort. Then you got stretch, and then you got panic on the outside. And the optimum where growth happens, personal growth, is in that stretch zone. You don't want to go into panic, because if you go into panic, actually you retract back into comfort. You don't want to go there again. That's your happy place. You've gone somewhere scary. You don't want to do it again. But actually, the bigger you can make your stretch element, then the more you have a chance to grow. So that for me is a big part of an adventure. But as I said, I think you only get there when the plan doesn't go to plan, when plan falls by the wayside and you've got to think on your feet, because then that really does. I mean, obviously it can go too far and it's, oh no, I don't know what I'm doing. But actually, if you've made that plan from the outset, then you've probably got a really good idea, especially with the risk assessment that I did. You've got a really good idea of kind of what's sensible, what's not. So I think had I just gone, oh, I'm going to press on, I'm going to go through the mountain pass. Doesn't matter. I haven't got, snow tires. I haven't got winter gear with me. Really? Yeah, okay. Maybe I'd have made it through, but maybe I'd have had a great video, but maybe I'd be, dead in a snowdrift. So probably doesn't make too much sense. Or even worse, actually, one of the parts of the movie I show had a navigation error because of the low cloud. Like I said, it was just very difficult to judge which mountain was which. Had I done that at night, had I just pressed on like I did the night before and done that, but in a snowy mountain pass, I could quite easily have just fallen off a cliff somewhere. Yeah. So I think, going back to your question, it's very much about challenge by choice, about like really figuring out how far you're willing to push it, and that everyone's limit is different. Everyone's comfort zone is different. Everyone's stretch zone is different. But just pushing yourself without getting into that panic zone is where I would say adventure lies.
Finding that stretch area, stretching it out. I love it. Steve, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your adventure, your experiences, and who you are with all of us. Thank you so much for coming on Journey with Jake.
Really, really appreciate it. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you so much to my guest, Steven James Ferris, for coming on the show and sharing his incredible experience biking across Iceland. If you want to follow along with Steven and learn more, visit StevenJamesFerris.com or follow him on Instagram at StevenJamesFerris. Thank you again, Steven, for sharing your journey with all of us. And a big thank you to all of you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed February. It's been a wild ride with 8 episodes this month. From Gary Arndt to Steven James Ferris, we've had some amazing adventures and learned some valuable lessons along the way. Starting next Thursday, we'll be back to weekly episodes, and I'm super excited for what's coming up. Next week, I'll be chatting with Chasen Hampton. Chasen was a member of the all-new Mickey Mouse Club and the music group The Party back in the late 80s and early 90s. I was a huge fan of the Mickey Mouse Club, The Party, and Chasen himself, so it was such an honor to talk with him and hear his story. I know you're going to love it just as much as I did recording it. Just remember, it's not always about the destination as it is about the journey. Take care, everybody.